Hello and welcome to Coronavirus Catch Up. I'm Jordan Kenny. We're live on the BBC News NI website and Facebook page and on the BBC iPlayer for the next 20 minutes or so. Thanks for tuning in, however you're joining us. Now, just earlier this afternoon, we heard from the First and Deputy First Ministers at the latest Stormont press briefing. Arlene Foster said the lockdown we're currently in was having a major difference on infection rates in Northern Ireland. Just on that, let's take a look at the latest COVID-19 figures from today. 10 more COVID-19 related deaths were recorded by the Department of Health in the latest 24-hour period. That brings the number of deaths here to 1,899. There's 671 people being treated for COVID in hospitals here. 68 of those patients are in intensive care units and 63 are on ventilators. 412 new positive cases were also reported today. However, on the vaccine front, there was some positive news. Arlene Foster told us that now well over 250,000 people have received their first jab in Northern Ireland. The exact number is 263,735. And if you're counting the total amount of vaccines given, so the first and second dose, more than 289,000 have been given out. The reproduction number, or R number as you might know it, is now sitting between 0.75 and 0.85 in the community, so still below that all-important 1. So that's where things stand in Northern Ireland at the minute with the figures. Moving on from that, we're going to be talking about business tonight. Of course, many businesses across Northern Ireland have been badly affected by the pandemic. You'll know that non-essential shops and hospitality venues, so that's places like bars and restaurants, they've been shut since Christmas Eve, and they were also shut for a large chunk of 2020 as well. Joining me tonight to talk about that, and more importantly, to let us know what this year may have in store, is our business reporter, Richard Morgan. Hi, Richard.
Good to be with you.
Richard, just before we get into the questions that have been sent in, there's a number of measures that have been taken by ministers in both London and Belfast over the last few months to try and soften the blow a bit for businesses. Can you tell us about some of the main things that have been put in place?
Yeah, well, by far the largest help or the largest support scheme is the government's job retention scheme, which has come to be known as the furlough scheme. And it has allowed employers to essentially keep people on their books, keep people in jobs, while the government covers a large percentage of their wages. Now, people at the minute who are on furlough should be receiving 80% of their salaries, but employers have to contribute national insurance and pension contributions. That is due to end at the end of April, but there's lots of lobbying going on, lots of calls at the minute saying this needs to be extended, because even when lockdowns are eased or we're starting to move towards some sort of normality, there's going to be quite a period of time before businesses get back up and running properly. Locally, the executive has spent hundreds of millions of pounds on various support schemes and grants. We had those one-off payments last year in the spring, summer time, and then we had various targeted schemes rolled out for different industries, most recently the large tourism and hospitality grant that has been rolled out. But it is worth saying there are people missing out right across the UK. People may be familiar with the excluded UK and the excluded NI groups, and they're still saying that, look, we have people who haven't had any support since last March and their businesses have been adversely affected. So that's the likes of those who are self-employed who might have missed out on the government help and the recent executive schemes supported. It's also sole traders who maybe own market stalls in St George's Market, for example, and then independent travel agents. So while there has been a significant amount of economic intervention, there are still people missing out and who are in desperate need of help.
So that's where we're at the minute. And I should say, if you're watching on Facebook tonight, feel free to get involved in the comment section. If you have any questions or thoughts about what's being discussed, leave them there and we'll try and get to them before we're off air. But Richard, we've got this question on retail here from Janet, and she's asking, is it likely that the government will extend the current rates holiday for high street retail?
Yeah, that's something that the executive is very keen to do. So at the minute, lots of retailers, the hospitality and some manufacturers are all benefiting from rates relief, that tax they pay for the premises that they occupy. And it's a huge overhead for so many businesses. And while they've had that holiday at the moment, the Finance Minister, Conor Murphy, he has earmarked £150 million to extend that rate relief going forward into the new financial year 21-22. For how long, we're not exactly sure yet. It depends on those allocations, but that has broadly been welcomed by various retail and business groups, because they say, well, look, even when we get back up and running, get back to some sort of normality, it is going to take us quite some time to recover all of those losses that we have experienced since last March.
Well, we mentioned there, Richard, about some of the shops being shut, any non-essential shops being shut, and there's been a few other options for people buying things like clothes. We've all been doing a lot more of it online. Over the last few weeks, we've seen hundreds of jobs lost at stores like Debenhams and Topshops. They've closed their doors. Is the pandemic solely to blame for this?
In a word, no. The high street has been facing difficulties for 10 years more. We've been talking about trying to rescue the high street, and that's because of various factors. So we obviously have the rise of online. There's not a day goes by that there isn't an Amazon van in my street delivering to somebody. And in terms of that shift online, that has really been accelerated by the pandemic. But then we had the big names like Debenhams, like House of Fraser or Fraser's, and they were expanding so quickly. And they have been left now with all of these stores and with a significant amount of bills, because they have to pay their rent, their business rates, as we just spoke about a minute ago. And all of these factors made for difficult trading conditions. But now, because they've been closed for most of the year, they just haven't been able to weather the storm. And our high streets are going to look very, very different when they do get back up and running at some point later this year. And that's why the executive has put together a high street task force to try and come up with ideas to revitalise our high streets and to try to keep them going, because retail is one of the largest employers in Northern Ireland. That employs tens of thousands of people, and we've seen so many of them lose their jobs over the course of this pandemic.
Well, talking about Debenhams and Topshop, there were 5 Debenhams stores in Northern Ireland. There were 14 Topshop stores. What kind of opportunities then, Richard, are out there for the staff who worked in those places now?
Well, the Debenhams site in Foyleside in the northwest, it has been taken over by Mike Ashley's Fraser's, so that will move into that location, that unit, which has saved jobs there. The rest, unfortunately, they may reopen to sell off their stock, but once that is gone, Debenhams will be gone from our high streets, and as will Topshop and Topman. It may seem very difficult to even think about looking for a job during a pandemic. You know, our labour market, while it has taken a hit, we haven't seen the true toll of what is going to happen because of the furlough scheme. And I do know from speaking to various companies over the last number of weeks within even manufacturing, they're still hiring, they're still planning to grow. And some have said, look, we are keen to employ people who maybe haven't fared well in the pandemic, who have lost their jobs as a result, particularly within retail and hospitality, and who don't need that training within our sector. We can provide it. And it's the same within the care sector, particularly in the middle of last year. Many within that industry were saying, look, we're in need of more staff, we're in need of more help because of self-isolating, because of sickness. And if you're in an industry that has been hit, we will take you on. And as far as I'm aware too, some of the departments, economy in general, specifically rather, have opened various training schemes. If people want to retrain, think about going down another career path, another line of work.
So there is some options out there. Richard, this next question, there's been a bit of chat about this online, and it seems for a while now. I've watched videos myself of small business owners discussing this and the impact that it's had on them. But the question is, why during this lockdown are some larger retailers still able to sell non-essential goods, while smaller and a lot of the time independent shops have had to close?
Yeah, so this has been a real point of contention for small and medium-sized businesses who are saying, well, this is really putting us at a competitive disadvantage. And it really boils down to the regulations. These larger retailers, they aren't doing anything wrong, because when you look at the regulations, you read the guidance on NI Direct and the Executive Office's website, it says that if you are a large retailer and more than half of the goods you offer are deemed to be essential, then you can continue to sell non-essential goods. You don't have to cordon them off. You don't have to stop people from buying them. And I think this, in terms of the annoyance for smaller businesses, that has been amplified by the fact that click and collect services have been suspended during this particular lockdown. And I know retail groups met with the First and Deputy First Ministers just a number of weeks ago to try and discuss these issues and get their concerns across, that they really don't think it is fair that while they're closed on a high street in a town or city centre, people can still go round the corner to a large retailer, a large supermarket, and buy the same goods. But it boils down to regulation, and it also comes down to, I would say, that ministers and retailers alike watched what happened in Wales. That did happen in Wales. Supermarkets, larger retailers were told they couldn't sell non-essential goods. Aisles were cordoned off, and this resulted in essentially a lot of annoyance, but a lot of people as well trying to access goods that inevitably were essential but had been deemed non-essential by the store in question and had been cordoned off. And I know one retail group, speaking to them, they've said, well, look, this also doesn't work because it creates less space to walk around these larger stores if you have lots of aisles cordoned off, which may result in people coming into contact with one another more than they should be.
Well, moving on to a different topic entirely here, Richard, travel. Every time we mention it, we get so many questions sent in. So we're going to talk about it here for a minute or two. But this is in from Sean. He says, I live in Northern Ireland and have flights booked to Paris from Dublin at the end of May. Can I get a refund on these flights if I have travel insurance? So I suppose it would be good to explain what the situation is for people who have flights booked at the minute. What options are available to them?
Well, it's always worth saying that if you have flights booked or package holiday booked and the provider cancels that you are entitled to a full cash refund. Many companies have been criticised for handing out vouchers or refund credit notes. You are entitled to a cash refund. In terms of when it comes to if you don't want to get on a flight because you think, well, I don't want to travel to that country, but the flight goes ahead, you're not entitled to any money back. Many airlines, many providers have been amending their policies and saying, well, look, we'll allow you to change your tickets free of charge to another date, or we'll allow you to take a voucher so you can book with us at another date. But the travel insurance, that's an interesting one, because I know from speaking to the Consumer Council in the past and from having a read around tonight of various different money supermarket websites, basically, if you booked your flights and had your travel cover before the start of the pandemic, so before March 2020, your travel insurance will cover you. But the sense is that if you booked your flights recently and you're wanting to try to reclaim them because you don't want to go, it's unlikely your travel insurance will cover.
And I suppose a lot of people have found themselves in this situation with flights booked for this year because they postponed them last year thinking that this year things would be a lot better. Like, I know my own parents were in that situation. They had flights booked last March to go to Hungary, and now this March the situation hasn't improved much.
And it would be lovely to get away with it, to get a break. I'm sure plenty of people are feeling that way. But look, it's been a very difficult time for the travel industry, and it's been a very difficult time for consumers too, because many of us were caught out in some way in terms of flights. I know I'm still waiting for a voucher from, I was given a voucher from a flight last April, and I'm still waiting for the cash refund. But it just depends on the airline, and many airlines have been pragmatic about this, and they're saying, well, look, we'll just offer flexi policies where if you want to move your ticket free of charge, or your booking, will let you do that, given the changing travel advice to various different countries and out of various countries, depending on lockdown measures.
Well, you mentioned there, Richard, that it's been a difficult year for the travel industry. Gareth's got in touch. He says he's thinking of going on holiday in September of this year, but he's wondering whether it's best to book now or wait until nearer the time. I suppose a lot of people know that the travel industry's had a rough year and are maybe trying to do their bit to support it, but is it wise to spend your money on flights at the minute?
And I think that's from covering the travel issue quite a bit over the last 10 months. Some people were happy enough to have a voucher for a period of time because they thought, well, if it keeps the airline or if it keeps the holiday company around, then I'll get the benefit because they offer routes that I need to use regularly or that I like to use. I can't advise whether or not it's a good time to book a holiday because I suppose you're weighing up whether or not you should you should try and save a bit of money booking it early, or try and wait for a last minute deal. But what I would say is that depending where you want to go, this pandemic is so unpredictable. It varies from country to country, from region to region within countries. And you may find that you book a holiday now thinking, well, look, the vaccination programme in Northern Ireland, in the UK, is rolling out pretty well. We should be fine to go. But the country you want to go to, their vaccination programme might not be going the same way, or they may still think, well, we're still not keen for foreigners to enter the country and possibly bring in another strain, another variant. But they also may be thinking, well, if people do come, they'll have to quarantine. And if you've booked a 2-week holiday somewhere, or a 1-week holiday somewhere, and you haven't factored that in, it's going to increase your costs by quite a bit if you want to go. And then you have the battle of a refund if your holiday maker is going ahead, but you actually don't want to.
Well, you're touching a bit there, Richard, on what this next question is asking. It's from Rianne, and she's asking, if a country requires quarantine on arrival by the summer, will airlines allow refunds or vouchers if the flights can't go ahead?
Well, if a country requires a quarantine upon arrival, it's likely that your flight will probably still go ahead, because the feeling will be, well, if you're going here, you're aware of the measures that will be in place. And if your flight goes ahead and you choose not to be on board, then you're essentially forfeiting your ticket unless you've tried to move it. But as I said, a lot of airlines are trying to be, sensible about this, reasonable. They want to try and have the best policy in place. And with changing travel policies, we have seen them say, well, look, we know the advice to this country has changed and the Foreign Office advice has changed. So as a result, we can give you a voucher, or we can amend your booking to a later date. But all of these things are very fluid and very hard to call, because we just don't know where we're going to be in 4 weeks' time, let alone 4 months' time or longer. And again, it will depend country to country. But essentially, the bottom line is, if you have to quarantine and travel isn't banned in and out of said country, it is likely your flight will go ahead. And if you opt not to go on the flight and haven't changed, you will lose your money.
So it really is a case then, Richard, I suppose, or would you say it's the case that if you're booking a flight, you kind of need to be prepared that you could lose that money?
Well, I think if you're booking a flight, or you're wanting to book a holiday down the line for this summer or September, check with the provider, the airline, the holiday company, whatever way you're booking your holiday, because they will have to adapt and will probably have some sort of coronavirus specific guidance or policies in place now as a result. And when you're booking, it's just a case of reading those often long terms and conditions, or asking, saying, well, look, what happens if I'm traveling to this country in August and they change their advice last minute? Where does that leave me? And will you allow me to change that booking free of charge, or get a voucher to book it at a later date if you're really keen to go to said place with a specific company in the future?
Okay. Well, we mentioned there about people who postponed their plans last year, thinking that things would be a bit better this year. Just on that, Eamon has got in touch. He says, I'm getting married in March 2021 after postponing for 1 year. Our venue can't hold our reception and won't refund us. Is there anything we can do?
Well, look, it's been a really difficult year for brides and grooms, because, I know several of my friends, they moved their wedding by a few months after the initial March lockdown, thinking things would return to normal fairly quickly. They didn't. They moved it again, and then they moved it to 2021. And this has happened for thousands of couples. And I've been speaking to people from the wedding industry just today, in fact, about the difficulties they face, because it affects venues, florists, photographers, bands. There's so many elements make a wedding, and the industry as a whole has really taken a hit. And they're already seeing cancellations this year, because people are thinking, well, actually, even if things go back to a bit of normality, we're probably not going to be able to have the wedding that we wanted, or as many guests as we wanted. I don't know the specifics in terms of this case or the circumstances, but what I would say is it's probably likely that you've signed some sort of contract with the venue that you booked. It's worth going through that contract to see what the cancellation and refund policy is, to see if that what you're being told matches what you agreed to at the time. And if you took out wedding insurance, it's also worthwhile having a look to see at that policy to see if that will give you some sort of cover. But it's been a very stressful, very difficult year for brides and grooms.
But a couple of options there for Eamon to explore. Finally, Richard, I just wanted to talk about this for a second. We've had people get in touch about working from home and what the policies are around that. So who is meant to be working in their office? Who should be at home? What's the guidance around this?
Well, the very strong guidance from the executive since last March has been anyone who is able to work from home should do so, and employers should facilitate this. And we have been lucky enough to be able to work from home, Jordan, and it's not been the case for everyone, particularly key workers. And really, this is going to depend, and it will differ from employer to employer and employee to employee, because, well, we've all been told to work from home where possible. When the shops were open, retail workers obviously had to go out to work. Same for hospitality, construction and manufacturing. All of that site work is taking place, and that can't be done from home. And then within workplaces, there are roles that can be done from your kitchen, your office, your living room, wherever you work from home. But within the same building, there will be roles that can only be done from within the office due to maybe technology or the type of data or sensitive information you hold. So really, it's about consulting with your employer to say, well, look, my role can be done from home fully, and I think it should be. But if it can't and you have to go into the workplace, your employer is obliged to have the right PPE for you, the right guidelines in line in order to keep you safe, so that there is social distancing maintained where possible. It's not possible in all workplaces. But again, the First and Deputy First Ministers, just a few weeks ago, in fact, they said that they were appalled to hear that some people were being forced to come into the office or the workplace when they could do their jobs from home. And they reiterated that advice that employers should be facilitating that where work can be done from the house.
Well, we have a question in here, Richard, I'm just seeing on my laptop, from John on Facebook. He's asking, it's quite open-ended, but he says, do we know when Northern Ireland will open up again? I suppose that's something that a lot of people in the business sector and the business industry will be wanting to know the answer to as well.
I think it's something all of us want to know the answer to, when we can see some sort of normality again. And to be honest, we just don't know, because you'll remember that this was a 6-week lockdown that was announced beginning Boxing Day. That was extended when the pressure on our hospitals was clear and due to the end at the beginning of March, but that is up for review in 2 weeks' time. And you would think, and the soundings even from Downing Street, from the Prime Minister, is that any unlocking of our economy, it's not going to be, let's flip a switch, everything has reopened and we're back to normal. It is going to be phased, much like we probably saw after the first lockdown. You'll remember, Jordan, we had cafes reopening, some shops reopening, then restaurants, then wet pubs. I think that's what we're going to see again, this phased reopening. But I can wait a little bit longer myself for my hairdresser, because I went for the home haircut. Hasn't gone well.
We've taken different approaches here, Richard, to the hairdressing situation. I've just left it. You've shaved it.
I've just gone for it. Yeah. So no, but I know obviously on a serious note that many within the close contact industry will want to get reopened as soon as possible, and many people out there will want to go and get their hair cut. But it's been a difficult time for business and a difficult time for everyone, but there's no straight answer or firm date that can be given for when we will go back to some sort of normality and reopen.
Well, Richard, thanks for that. We'll have to leave it there, but things are certainly a lot clearer in my head after all that, and I'm sure it's the same for everyone watching. Thanks to everybody who got in touch as well with your questions. We didn't have enough time to get through them all, but hopefully the questions we've answered this week will help make sense of what's going on. Don't forget that you can keep up to date with all the latest on the BBC News NI website, which you'll find at bbc.co.uk/newsni. We're on social media as well. Chances are, if you're watching this on Facebook, you've already found our Facebook page, but we're on Instagram, Twitter and YouTube as well. Just type in BBC News NI and you should find us on there. But that's it from us. We'll be back again next week with another coronavirus catch up. But until then, stay safe.